Today, something historic is unfolding in Ottawa, a countdown that could decide not just Canada's financial future, but the survival of Prime Minister Mark Carney's entire government. Because on November 4th, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne will table Carney's very first federal budget, a moment that could either stabilize the country or send it hurtling toward political chaos. And the warning from opposition leader Pierre Poilievre could not be clearer. Keep the deficit under $42 billion or face a political meltdown. For weeks, pressure has been building inside Parliament Hill like a ticking bomb. Carney's team calls this budget a strategic reset. But behind closed doors, even senior Liberal MPs admit it could just as easily be their government's last stand. Why? Because this is a minority government hanging by just 3 votes. One failed budget, and it all collapses. And Poilievre knows that. He's already moved into full campaign mode, writing directly to the Prime Minister, warning him not to repeat what he called the Trudeau-era mistakes of runaway spending and hollow promises. In his now famous letter, Poilievre demanded sweeping tax cuts, lower income taxes, a rollback of the so-called industrial carbon tax, and the elimination of what he brands home-building taxes that he claims are driving housing costs through the roof. But the biggest line in that letter, the one that set Ottawa on fire, was the demand to keep the deficit below $42 billion. Because, as Poilievre puts it, every dollar above that line is a dollar stolen from Canada's future. The problem? Carney's own projections, leaked last week by a senior official, suggest the deficit could actually approach $70 billion this year. That leak set off panic not only in Parliament, but also on Bay Street and even Washington, where the U.S. administration under President Donald Trump is watching closely. Sources in Washington say Trump's advisors have privately warned Ottawa that economic instability north of the border could disrupt several cross-border energy and trade deals currently being renegotiated. And in a fiery tweet last night, Trump himself wrote, "Carney's Canada is spending like crazy. Not good for business. Not good for America." It was vintage Trump, but behind the bluster, U.S. officials reportedly fear that a political meltdown in Ottawa could stall critical projects, including the long-delayed North American Energy Corridor, a plan Trump has called the backbone of continental independence. Back in Canada, the numbers tell a brutal story. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, Jason Jacques, projects that the federal deficit for this fiscal year will hit nearly $70 billion, a staggering gap from Poilievre's $42 billion ceiling. The culprit? Slower growth, rising costs, and a wave of new commitments, including a massive boost in defense spending to finally meet NATO's target of 2% of GDP. Carney insists this is necessary, calling it an investment in national security and long-term stability. But his critics say it's reckless, that Canada can't afford both rearmament and social expansion at once. And inside the Liberal caucus, frustration is bubbling. According to a leaked memo from a senior staffer, several MPs have warned Carney that without a major fiscal shift, the NDP will walk and the government will fall. The math is unforgiving. The Liberals are 3 votes short of a majority. That means they'll need help, or at least silence, from one of the opposition parties. The Bloc Québécois, led by Yves-François Blanchet, has already released a list of 18 demands, including $814 million for Quebecers to match federal carbon rebate payments in other provinces, higher OAS benefits, and billions more for healthcare and housing. Privately, Blanchet's office has hinted that if Carney wants stability, Quebec wants its share. The NDP, under interim leader Don Davies, is equally blunt. Davies met Carney earlier this month and made it clear, "We won't support an austerity budget." The New Democrats want new investments in healthcare, affordable housing, and union jobs, not cuts. Davies told reporters that Canadians don't want another election right now, but his tone suggested that his patience is wearing thin. So, Carney stands at a crossroads. If he caves to Poilievre's demands, he risks losing the NDP and Bloc and alienating his progressive base. If he gives in to the Bloc or the NDP, he risks blowing up the deficit and triggering the fiscal crisis Poilievre has warned about. Even within the Prime Minister's office, insiders describe the atmosphere as knife-edge tense. One aide described Carney as working 18-hour days, flipping through spreadsheets, trying to make the math and the politics add up. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Late last night, multiple sources in Ottawa claimed that Carney's budget team held a confidential emergency call with several major Canadian banks. The reason? Fears that if the budget fails and markets panic, the Canadian dollar could tumble below 70 US cents for the first time since 2016. One source even alleged that officials discussed a temporary capital control, a rarely used financial measure that could restrict cross-border transactions if the dollar collapses. The Finance Department denies this, calling it speculative nonsense. But the fact that the rumor even exists shows how fragile investor confidence has become. And there's more. According to a leak reported by the National Post, Carney's staff quietly drafted contingency election plans, codenamed Project Winterguard. The plan outlines how the Liberals could pivot within 72 hours of a failed budget vote, launching a national economic security campaign that blames opposition parties for sabotaging recovery. When asked about it, the Prime Minister's office refused to confirm or deny. For Pierre Poilievre, this is all political gold. At a rally in Calgary, he told supporters, Carney and his insiders think they can scare Canadians with talk of market crashes. But the real crash is happening in your wallets, because of them. The crowd erupted, chanting, "Fire Carney! Fire Carney!" Poilievre's strategy is simple but deadly effective. Paint Carney as a global banker out of touch with ordinary Canadians, a man who, in Poilievre's words, talks like Wall Street and spins like Justin Trudeau. And it's working. Recent polls show the Conservatives pulling ahead by 6 points nationally, their largest lead since the election of 2021. As November 4th approaches, the clock is ticking, and the stakes couldn't be higher. On one side, Pierre Poilievre, demanding deep cuts and fiscal restraint. On the other, Mark Carney, promising investment and stability in uncertain times. Between them, a parliament on the edge of collapse. If Carney's budget fails, Canadians could be heading to the polls before Christmas, in what some insiders already call the election no one wanted, but everyone saw coming. And if it passes, he might just buy the Liberals another year of political life, but at the cost of major concessions and an even deeper split within his own ranks. Either way, November 4th won't just be a date on the calendar. It will be the day Canada finds out whether its Prime Minister can balance the books and hold the country together. Because one thing is certain, when Pierre Poilievre warned Carney to keep the deficit under $42 billion or face a political meltdown, he wasn't bluffing. And the fuse, it seems, has already been lit.